What is up, guys? Mike Marlinski here with the Metal Webzine. Welcome to episode 46 of All the Metal Podcast. Today we're going to be discussing Black Sabbath's 10th studio album, Mob Rules, which is their second album with Dio on vocals. This is Vinny Appice's first album on drums. Shortly after the release of this album, Dio's solo career began, so we'll already be transitioning to a new vocalist for our next episode. But right now, we're talking Mob Rules, and once again, another pivotal moment in Sabbath history. We're going through a lot of those right now. We're at a very transient stage in the band's history. So today our co-host is Joe Hufford. We last spoke to him when we discussed Sabbath'S, and it went pretty well. It was a fun episode, and we learned a lot about Joe as well. So let's get him back on here and refresh and reintroduce him to you guys and get into our Mob Rules discussion. And if you have anything to say about anything you really want to say about Mob Rules, please leave it in the comments, because we don't get a lot of comments, and I would love to read some fucking comments from you guys. Alright, thanks for tuning in. Let's give Joe a call.
Hello?
Hello, how's it going?
Not bad, how are you?
I'm doing well. Before we get going, I was just hoping you wouldn't mind reintroducing yourself to everybody and just kind of talking about what you do and such.
Yeah, my name is Joe Hufford, also known as John Question. I'm an administrator at a game studio, and I'm a musician. Just starting out on both, so can't show anyone anything yet.
Cool. Yeah, what's the name of the studio again?
Sneezing Panda Studio.
Sneezing Panda, that's right, that's it. Okay, so we're here to discuss Mob Rules, and did you have anything to add before we get started?
Just that Mob Rules was actually my first introduction to Ronnie James Dio as a singer.
Awesome. This will make for a great conversation then. That's really cool. I'm pretty sure mine was the Holy Diver album, but I mean, we'll inevitably talk about some of Dio's solo stuff later. But okay, so in brushing up for this, I was reading a lot of the old critique that this album received and that Tony Iommi received for this album, and one of the biggest criticisms, or the most predominant criticisms that I read, was that Mob Rules had so many parallels to Heaven and Hell in terms of songwriting and the track listing and the flow of the album. And a lot of people just called it Heaven and Hell Part 2. And I was wondering if you ever got that vibe from this.
No, I'd highly disagree. The change-up of the drummers is just super apparent. There's just a much different pace and feel to it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the only real similarity I heard in terms of writing and just the order of events, like, the only thing I thought was that there was a big similarity between the intro of Neon Nights versus the intro of Turn Up the Night, and because they both come in with those driving riffs and, you know, the full band pretty much. I mean, not so much with Turn Up the Night, because I think there's a little bit of either a guitar or bass intro. It's like I'm blanking on it right now, but like both of those songs come in with those driving riffs with a two-step like rock drum beat underneath, and, you know, it's just, you know, fist pumping action and just a real like banger of a song. So I guess both the way that both of those opening tracks just kind of crash in, I guess that's a major similarity, like the way both albums start. But even those songs are two completely different songs, like to me at least. And yeah, other than that, I didn't really notice anything all that similar that big Sabbath fans back in the '80s, I guess, noticed. So yeah, so you brought up the changing of the drummer. So is that pronounced Apis or Apis? Because I don't remember what I did a little intro before I called you, and I don't remember what I said, but I think it's Apis.
To be honest, I couldn't tell you.
I think yeah, I think his name is Vinny Appice. But I mean, I could get crucified for this later. I guess we'll find out. Okay, so yeah, you brought up the drummer change. How did you find Vinny Appice's first performance with Sabbath? Just overall, not necessarily comparing him to Bill Ward, but just how did you upon first taking note of the change? How did you come to like that change when reviewing the albums?
Yeah, I mean, it's never going to feel the same without Bill Ward. Bill Ward had a lot of that bluesy feel to Sabbath, and I really do miss that. That the drummers that have replaced him since they're talented drummers, and I think this guy was under a lot of pressure, and I think he performed well overall. There's maybe a piece or two that it sounded like they were still trying to get their groove a little bit, which you can hear a little bit better in Dehumanizer.
Sure.
But overall, I think he did pretty good for the spot he was in.
Sure. Right. Because, I mean, they kind of just... I don't remember exactly, was a lot of this material written, and they just kind of threw him a bunch of songs when he first showed up, or...
I honestly don't know the history of this album.
Right. I mean, I did a lot of research, and I listened to it a bunch, but, I'm starting... Now that we're talking, I'm starting to think of things that I didn't research at all, which was, I mean, I know we're going to talk about the shift in creative power in the writing room, because that was another big thing that that kind of affected the course of events, the series of events, during the recording of this album and then, post-release. Because for a long time it was everything more or less creatively was up to Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler. And I read that that Ozzy and Bill Ward were more or less, come into the practice room when they were called, more or less, or come into the studio when they were called, and it was, they had that kind of a dynamic, especially Ozzy. But, with Dio and now Vinny Appice in the band, I know there was a big shift in creative voices that certainly had an impact on things. So for Mob Rules, right now I'd like to do what I usually do every episode, your favorite riff, lyric, bass lick, and drum section. So I'll just rattle through mine really quick. So, in Falling Off the Edge of the World, there's this Middle Eastern sounding riff with a bunch of hammer-ons, or at least that's what I call it. It just sounds like an endless run that repeats with cool hammer-ons on the tail, and it's followed by this awesome guitar solo. So that would be my favorite guitar moment, I guess, on the whole album, is when the bridge riff in Falling Off the Edge of the World comes in, and there's a bit of a tempo shift there, and it kind of picks up just the note arrangement of that riff, and then followed by the solo, which is this. The solo is another example of that. It's this endless run. It gets kind of ranty, but at the same time it's kind of a hook. It has a lack of repetition, but it's a solo that still somehow gets stuck in your head despite its lack of repetition. And my favorite lyric is in Sign of the Southern Cross, and it's, if an echo doesn't answer when it hears a certain sound, then the beast is free to wander but is never seen around. I just wanted to pick something aside from the obvious, which is, if you listen to Fools, the Mob Rules, which is, the thing everybody remembers from this album lyrically. So my favorite bass lick, and I love it when Geezer Butler stands out. And there's a call and answer lead passage in the song "Slipping Away," and it's when it's I guess it's in the bridge. It's in the latter half of the song, and it's when Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler kind of trade off on leads, and it's a call and answer passage that's really cool. And the bass is turned up super loud when that hits, and it's got this filth and grime to it that I just love. And my favorite drum moment for Vinny Appice, again, assuming that's how you pronounce his name, the whole outro of Over and Over. It's in the 3/4 time signature, but the drum line specifically it has a very like progressive feel to it. The way he does this pickup beat on the snare, and then it kind of falls back into the stomp, and it's spaced out, and then it goes back to a pickup, then it falls back. It's just it has a very it has like a jutting out feel to it, because it's like you're tripping over something, and then you start walking normally again, then you trip again, but he keeps it in 3/4, and with Dio chanting the line over and over. So yeah, those are my favorites of those 4 categories, and I would love to hear yours now that I'm done ranting.
Alright, so my favorite lyric is from Falling Off the Edge of the World. It's "Help me, tell me I'm sane. I feel a change in the earth and the wind and the rain. Save me, take me away. You know I've seen some creatures from hell and I've heard what they say."
Oh, that's great. That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
And overall, I just really love that song. And honestly, it's hard not to just say, just to pick a favorite, like, riff and bass line and drum piece from that song, because that's by far my favorite song on the album.
Right.
It speaks to me in a lot of ways. But other than that, my favorite riff, I'd have to say, is the little, they're kind of like solos in Turn Up the Night, when they go, it's very satisfying in the song, and I think that's what really differentiates it from Neon Nights, is just the way that's delivered. Because, like you said, there is some similarity in the way they come in, but other than that...
Are you talking about, like the sustained, the bends, like the really long, like, sustained notes with, like, the bends that Iommi does? Is that the lick you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool stuff, like, let's see, who did they have on this? They had... Oh, fuck. I just had it in front of me. Hang on, I'm sorry. It's gonna bug me. I know this is unprofessional, but it's gonna bug me. Hang on. There's nothing professional about what we're doing right now anyway, so... Oh my god, what the fuck is his name? It's really, really gonna bother me. Okay, Jeff Nichols played the keyboards on Mob Rules. And you were talking about those long sustaining notes that Tony Iommi can just make sound amazing with just a subtle bend and a little bit of reverb or something like that. All my favorite keyboard moments on this album are just Jeff Nichols droning a note. If you just drone an ominous note, it brings so much to a section. It's like less is more, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Keep going. I'm sorry to keep cutting you off.
No, you're good. The favorite bass line would be from Mob Rules. It is like the tempo in that. Butler just really stands out with the bass playing, almost sounding a little bit like Iron Maiden with the pace and the particular tempo he's going at there. It's pretty impressive. My favorite keyboard part is it's the part right after the intro of Falling Off the Edge of the World, where it sounds like it's glittering and then it's like falling.
Yep.
And then my favorite drum part is that I can't pick a spot of that song, but it's Falling Off the Edge of the World. I feel like that entire song, Vinny had found the groove with the band, and it was a really tight-knit and instrumentally well done song.
It is a great song. Like it's not my favorite song on the album, but like I definitely have a few more things to mention in it. Like the further we get into this, like you're definitely right. Like it's just it's a complete meal. I use that analogy a lot. It's the whole package. So.
Yeah. And then my favorite vocal performance by Dio, outside of lyrics, is from Country Girl. I feel like his voice was just really on point for that entire song.
Have you found that nobody likes Country Girl?
Well, the funny thing is how I was introduced to this. I stole it from my father, and he would actually rant and rave about Country Girl as a song. So that's not how I was introduced to it, but
I think my favorite thing about Country Girl is how heavy the song starts, like how heavy that opening riff is. It's kind of it's almost like another one of those classic doom metal songs if you look back on the genre like that. And it doesn't, the title Country Girl, it doesn't sound like the song sounds at all. There's a juxtaposition there that I really love. Like, you hear the name Country Girl and your mind immediately goes somewhere else. Like, your mind immediately goes off to fucking Garth Brooks land or something like that. But like, that song is really, really fucking heavy, and it's surprisingly heavy because of the title. Like, it has a very deceitful title to it.
Yeah, and as when I first heard it as a youth, I kind of wrote it off because I'm like, oh, Country Girl. But listening to it as an adult, like, that's a mean riff, and I understand the lyrics a little bit better as a further along adult.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, he's, I think Dio does a lot of soul searching on this album. Lyrically, it's, like, Dio often speaks in fantastical metaphors, or he'll talk about a love story kind of in general, like getting away from the fantasy stuff. If it's a love story, he'll talk about love in general, but like, even when he talks about these fantastical characters, it's always personal. At least that's my interpretation of it. Like, Dio uses these big themes to get very personal, and the song Country Girl is kind of stripped down to the point where he's not hiding behind a metaphor. You know what I mean? It's just a very raw, cut and dry song, with love as the central theme. At least that's my interpretation of it. Again, I purposely did not research the exact meanings of the songs as the band intended, in 1981, because, I'm a big believer in lyrics being open to interpretation, so I didn't want to, like, if anything like that was posted somewhere on the internet, I didn't want to, like, taint my interpretation of it, I guess.
That makes sense.
I don't know.
I don't disagree with that policy. It's, art is in the eye of the beholder, or the ear.
Right. Right.
And, I personally, outside of metal, classical music is a close second. And it just, I don't want to know what that artist was thinking, because I'm going to go on a completely different journey with that.
It is, right. It is such, classical music's a perfect example. Like, it's such an emotive experience. And, if you are the type of person that enjoys classical music and can immerse yourself in it and go on your own journey with it, then, yeah, why would you want to, make it your own? That's why music is there. It's subjective. It's there to make, so you can make it your own, and no matter what it is, whatever genre you're listening to, whatever you're in the mood to listen to. Like, once a band, I was just watching a podcast, and it's just going off complete tangent right now. Nothing to do with Sabbath. Not even the same ballpark. So, it's a podcast, and it's Dean Lamb from Archspire, and it's Misha from Periphery, and they're talking about how, I've never heard it worded quite like this, but it's worded perfectly. Once you write a song and you record that song, and then you play that song live, it's not yours anymore. And the thinking behind that is, once it's recorded and it's released, and then you go to play it live, it's a song the audience knows. And most of the audience is going to want to hear it performed that way. So, like, it's no longer open to improvisation or interpretation. Like, that song's out there in the world and people know it, and people are coming to the show to hear that song performed that way. So, in a way, it's, once the song's out there, it's no longer yours. And I thought that was a super, I guess I'd thought about it, but I'd never thought about it in those exact words before, so I thought that was cool. But yeah, that's, yeah, I like that. I like this little tangent we just went off on. That's cool. So yeah, just do me a favor. Go back to your, and I know you were talking about how Geezer stood out in the title track, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what was your favorite drum moment again?
It was in Falling Off the Edge of the World, where it
right, after that note, like, it's like a descending, like a falling keyboard progression, and then the song kicks in, right?
Yeah, and honestly, like, all the instruments are on point, and it's just this slow, like, march into, it sounds like a march straight into hell, and it's very, it's a very image-provoking instrumental piece. I mean, it's not instrumental, but the instrumental bits of it are very image-provoking, even without the words.
Yeah, that is my favorite. I'll just skip ahead. I'll skip ahead to what, our order here, but that transition is my favorite keyboard moment on the album. And it's the way it starts off with a droning note, but then it kind of descends, goes almost dissonant, and then the song kicks in, and everyone's back. And it's like there's chaos. It's like a chaotic, like, dissonant overture, and then everyone just clicks in on the same page again, and that opening riff kicks in, and it's back to being a steady beat. And I really love that change. It's a really powerful moment. Okay, so now, like, I don't like doing hypotheticals, because, things are the way they are, and, we are where we are because of a specific series of events, and, it's really, it's, alternate universe type shit. Whereas, we should be talking about, how did this happen, or, like, all these things happened in a certain order to get us here. But, like, I still like hypotheticals, so, even though I don't like them. So, my hypothetical for this episode is, okay, so if Dio had stuck with Sabbath after Mob Rules, never started a solo career offered by Warner Brothers or however that happened. So my question to you is, what sort of an album do you think would have naturally come next for Black Sabbath had Dio never left after Mob Rules? And so I listed a few examples, and one is Born Again Reimagined, something entirely different, an album similar to the previous two, so Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules. So, personally, what I think would have happened, and, like, Tony Iommi and Vivian Campbell are, like, totally different. But, like, what I still think would have happened is, in that universe, I think we would have gotten some kind of version of Holy Diver, but obviously with Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler writing their signature nuances into more epic songs. So my question to you is, if Dio had stayed with the band, what kind of an album would have come next?
Now, when you sent me this question, I gave Born Again a quick run-through again, just to brush up. And honestly, I'm going to say what I've always said, and that album just doesn't sit right with me. And I think what's lagging is the vocals, because Ozzy and Dio both is just very satisfying, as you say, full meal type stuff. and that album just didn't sit right with me. And it wasn't the instrumental composure. I feel like the instruments in that album were exactly how Sabbath would have progressed. That felt natural, but as soon as the vocals kick in and the lyrics start, it doesn't feel right. I think that lyrical content and the vocal content is just a little bit lacking. Not saying the dude's a bad singer, it didn't feel right for me. It never did. And I feel like it would have just been the same instruments as Born Again, but with just more satisfying song and lyrical content and vocals.
Yeah, like I mean, this is the next episode, so I don't want to get too much into Born Again right now, but like, it's the single, it's the one album with Ian Gillan, it's the one album where, you know, the vibes of Black Sabbath and Deep Purple collide. And you're right, it feels off. I wouldn't say I dislike it. I wouldn't say that it feels off or wrong to me, because I do like Born Again. It's just a very unique segue in the discography of Sabbath. And there's nothing quite like it before, and nothing quite like it ever happens again. It's just it's almost like a stutter. It's like when you're listening to someone speak fluidly and then all of a sudden they start to stutter. That's what Born Again is to me, but I don't necessarily dislike it. That's like just off the top of my head, that's how I view it. But
I feel that the instruments were still satisfying in the album. That's where I get the mixed feelings on it. But the vocals, just,
right.
I like Deep Purple. Don't get me wrong.
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely, man. It's kind of a cop-out answer, but my favorite song on Born Again is the title track. I think that even with Ian Gillan on vocals, I think his vocals soar in that song. Like, that is an epic song loaded with crazy notes, like sustained notes, and it's just it's like a heavy epic ballad, even though I use this term a lot when I'm talking about Sabbath. Like, they have these doom metal ballads, and like, there wasn't really doom metal back then, not the way we understand it now. So like, nobody would have like started calling it that back then, at least as far as I know. But like, they have these songs, and I think the Born Again title track is one of these doom metal ballads where it has this weight to it, this heaviness, but it's still very dramatic. So, I don't know. Like, I think Sign of the Southern Cross might be a doom metal ballad. Unless I might be thinking of a different song on Mob Rules. But whatever, we can keep going. Okay, so we just did the hypothetical, and we just talked about... Oh, yeah, so I skipped ahead to mine, like... What's your favorite keyboard moment on the song? Like, I'm assuming that it's going to be that transition and falling off.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's basically the same thing that you said.
Right, yeah. Okay, so now we can get back into the writing room. So it's 1981, and the album isn't too far away from being released. So now we're in between the release of Heaven and Hell and the release of Mob Rules. It's about a year apart. So, knowing the band's history and given the lineup change, like, what's your take on the shift of creative power in the band? With the new lineup has come new voices in the writing room, etc. Like, we talked about how Ozzy and Bill Ward just kind of came when they were called, or at least that's what I've read, and that's the impression I've gotten. But now, it's Dio and Vinny Appice. So now that Dio is 2 albums in and Vinny Appice is 1 album in. So how did you perceive the shift of creative power? Like, when you listen to the Ozzy albums flow into the Dio albums, like, what's your take on that?
It's interesting because, you know, they almost start out trying to lift off in, like, Heaven and Hell, and it seems like they have more of a synthesizer thing going on that, like, just sounds more of a positive, upbeat thing, and then they crash back down into that, almost back into the Sabbath groove of being how dark and heavy it is. I feel like this one's a little bit heavier than Heaven and Hell, personally. I think that's what Vinny brings to it, is just a little bit of heaviness. It's a little less blues, a little bit more heavy.
Sure.
This is the gateway to where they really just, they sound even darker than they used to.
Right.
And which
right.
Hard to do. And it starts to really set the stage for Dehumanizer, which I am a big fan of.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I won't digress into that, but that's my personal favorite with Dio.
Oh, mine too. Mine too. My favorite Sabbath album of all time is Dehumanizer. Hands down.
But Mob Rules was how I was introduced to Ronnie James Dio. You know, I was skeptical at first because I hadn't really given it a listen. And, you know, changing singers is a big thing with bands. It's like, is that going to work out? A lot of times it doesn't. You know, I wasn't disappointed. Let's put it that way. I wasn't disappointed. I'm like, oh, this is different. It's definitely different. Because I didn't hear Heaven and Hell first. I went straight from, I didn't even get to hear Technical Ecstasy or Never Say Die till way later. Mm-hmm. So I went straight from Sabotage to Mob Rules was the next one I listened to. It was kind of a jump, but not really. And it was kind of interesting that I went back and listened to the albums in between, and they almost have more of a positive, upbeat feel.
Sure.
And from Sabotage was very dark, and then Mob Rules was starting to get back to that dark bit that I liked in that part that I missed. It was actually a little bit more of an upbeat, sort of flowery feeling.
Right.
Despite, obviously, dark lyrics because of Sabbath. But,
yeah. Yeah. You talked about Bill Ward being more blues-oriented. And that's apparent, you know, in a lot of Tony Iommi's call and answer riffs. Like even something like down, like a call and answer riff like that. Like, you know, that is the way Bill Ward might approach the drums on something like that, you know. Just a simple example. Whereas Vinny Appice is more of a straightforward drummer. But, so on Mob Rules, on those heavy songs that would later be associated with more of a doom metal vibe, like songs that emulate what would later become doom metal, like, you know, Vinny Appice has... I wrote this album up, like, yesterday. So, I mentioned this a few times in my write-up, like, he has a signature stomp to his drumming. And it's just super simplistic. But he's a very good song drummer. You know, he always does what's best for the song. So when there is a slow, sludgy riff with, like, heavy chords and bends and, you know, just something that requires just a subtle, like, stomp behind it, like, he nails it. And that's one of the major differences between Bill and Vinny, to me, is that, you know, Bill had a lot more pizzazz in his playing that might have taken away from those heavier doom metal riffs. and that's another hypothetical. We don't know what this album would have sounded like with Bill Ward on drums. We can speculate, but that's not what happened. So, no, that's really cool. So, are there any... See, here's the thing. This is what Bill Page and I were talking about on the last episode. When we were talking about Heaven and Hell, we both agreed that the latter half of the album just isn't as memorable because of how powerful those first 4 songs are. But this is another thing I think that makes Mob Rules stand out. And with Mob Rules, I think every song is... I don't want to say... Well, I don't want to compare to, the front half of Heaven and Hell, but I think if you're just going to focus on the latter half of the albums, I think the latter half of Mob Rules is more memorable than the latter half of Heaven and Hell. Because of songs like, Slipping Away and Country Girl and just, and especially Falling Off the Edge of the World, which is this, to me, Falling Off the Edge of the World and Over and Over, those 2 songs are kind of like opuses in and of themselves. So, are there any take it or leave it songs on this album? Because like we were saying, I even like the juxtaposition of Country Girl. I can't think of any songs that, I could take. I could listen to this album all the way through. I don't think I could take or leave any of them.
I will say Slipping Away, the only beef I have with Slipping Away is, I wish, I don't know, the vocals that Dio laid on the studio version of it, they don't quite sound right. It's just me. Lyrically it's good, instrumentally it's good. I feel like Dio has it in him I didn't like the way he sang that one on the studio record. But overall, other than that, it's a good song. I don't have anything that I would remove from the album.
The way he sings Slipping Away?
Yeah, just the way his vocals go into that. And it's just a personal preference. I'm not saying he did a poor job. It's just a personal preference.
What I like vocally in Slipping Away is it gets to this bouncy groove where the drums, guitars, and vocals lock in with each other, and it's for that slipping away. I think that's a really cool dynamic in the song. And again, that's not even... I guess that's a vocal pattern. That's not even in terms of, Dio melodically, but that's... When I think of the vocals, I think of that section. Okay, so now we're... Oh, yeah, this is a fun one. Well, it was for me. But I was curious about... Okay, so... What mental imagery forms for you when you hear E5150 or E5150 or however they prefer to word that?
Well, I'm going to say 2 things about it. First of all, I actually worked in a factory for a while where one of the major components they used was an E5-150 nut. So it's almost aggravating to look at the title these days. But...
Oh, because there's no dash? Or because it reminds you of your job?
It reminds me of that.
Reminds you of your job, okay.
But no, as far as the track itself and how it's performed, it reminds me of basically a robot apocalypse, AI taking over Terminator type stuff. What year did the first Terminator movie come out?
I'm gonna say 84.
84.
Yeah, the one that's just called the first one, the Terminator. I want to say that came out in 84. I'll look it up right now because I have the internet.
Yeah, I want to say you're right.
Yeah, 1984. Yeah, and it's set in 1984 too. That's why I had that in my head. So yeah, that's only 3 years later.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is it predates the Terminator movies, and that's kind of the visual I get in my head is some Terminator type stuff, where AIs and robots are basically taking over the world. That's what the song makes me feel and think.
There is a slow dissension quality to it that I heard, almost reminiscent of how the keyboards transition to the opening riff and Falling Off the Edge of the World. And so when I first heard it, or when I first really paid attention to it, I imagined a flying saucer, an alien spacecraft, crashing into the ocean and sinking, and the aliens are drowning. Like, that's what I just right off the top of my head. The first time I really paid attention to that instrumental, that's what I saw in my head. but I really like yours too. I really like yours, and it's funny that that's a really cool tie-in with the Terminator franchise that started 3 years later. That's cool. So yeah, we talked about our favorite moments on the album. So you probably said this already. You probably already told me it's Falling Off. But what's your favorite song on the record?
I mean, you got it right there, hands down.
Yeah, I had a really tough time, but I gotta go with Sign of the Southern Cross. But it was either gonna be that or Falling Off the Edge of the World. It sure as hell wasn't gonna be the title track, because, not to say that I'm sick of the title track, but I guess I'm annoyed by the praise that it gets. Just because it's another, it would be, to me, it would be another cop-out response. And there's so much more on this record that is worthy of attention and praise. So, yeah, so Sign of the Southern Cross. I love the acoustic intro. I love that smooth higher register that Dio goes into to cue in the heavier stuff in Sign of the Southern Cross, because, I think he took a step back. He didn't want to take away from those beautiful acoustics. And it has an epic feel to it. It's another one of those that might qualify for a doom metal ballad. But I love the epicness of the chorus. But yeah, Falling Off the Edge of the World, that's another just amazing, epic song filled with quality moments that doesn't get enough discussion, I feel. So, now that we've picked apart the record, we all know what happened, what direction Dio chose to go in after this record. So what's your general opinion on Dio's solo discography? This is an interesting question for you, because most people heard Dio for the first time via Holy Diver, but you were first introduced to Dio with Mob Rules. So what's your opinion on the direction Dio went in next?
So the interesting thing is, I think I've only given the Holy Diver is the title track on that album, right? It's been a long time. But I've only given that a brief listen. I actually haven't educated myself fully on Dio's works. I've heard a bit here and there of a few Rainbow songs, a few Dio songs, but overall, I haven't given them a thorough listen, and this kind of gives me some homework now to do. As a musician, I need to re-educate myself. So I'm glad you brought it up, and I decided to wait, because now I'm just going to go listen and then answer you later.
It's a cop-out answer, but I think Holy Diver is the best album. I think Dio's first solo album is the best Dio album. I think for least favorite, it's a tie between probably Lock Up the Wolves and Dream Evil. Let's see. Probably Lock Up the Wolves. Dream Evil isn't that bad.
Like I said, I haven't given them enough of a solid listen, and at the very least, I have to do that to educate myself.
Right. Yeah, let's go through them really quick and see if I can. Not that you want my perspective, but Holy Diver is amazing. The Last in Line is really good, but it to me it had a lot to live up to. So I mean, what I did was and I hadn't even been born yet when Holy Diver came out, obviously. So I had to go back and kind of educate myself on Dio a number of years ago, and what I did was I tried to listen to everything in order. The studio albums. I'm big on like studio albums and if I'm gonna research a band, especially after they're disbanded, like try to listen to just the studio albums in chronological order if I can. So The Last in Line is good, but it had a lot to live up to. Sacred Heart, same thing. Dream Evil and Lock Up the Wolves, those two came out right next to each other, and that's where I felt like it started to fall off. Strange Highways. Bill said this in our last episode. Strange Highways is flat out not good. But you might love it. That's, again, it's subjective. The great thing about music and art, you might fucking love it. Okay, now that I'm looking at the list, I'd say Strange Highways is my least favorite Dio album. And then, in between Strange Highways and Angry Machines, that's when Dehumanizer happened. The greatest fucking Sabbath album, in my opinion. So, oh no, wait. Maybe Dehumanizer, hang on. I think I'm wrong. Dehumanizer was 92, I think. So Dehumanizer maybe came out between Lock Up the Wolves and Strange Highways? Let's see. Yeah. So, that's even more interesting then. That... okay, that's even... Sorry. I'm going off on a whole... Since we brought it up, I'm going off on a whole thing now. Or a whole research assignment. Okay, so that's even more interesting because my least favorite Dio album immediately follows my favorite Sabbath album with Dio. So I don't know. Let me know. Yeah, run through these albums and then let me know what you think. I'm very curious now.
Okay, yeah. I definitely will, because, like I said, it got me thinking. I'm like, I haven't actually, I think I listened to Holy Diver, once. So I really should go back and listen to them and digest them. Even if I don't like them, it'll let me know what to avoid when I'm making my own music.
Right. Again, you might love Strange Highways. Moving forward with the podcast, I'm pretty much sold on this. The next artist I'm going to focus on is probably Devin Townsend. But I would eventually love to come back to Dio and just hyper-analyze all the Dio studio albums. That would be cool. And I would, love to have you on for some of those if you're up for that. But, okay, so I'm out of stuff. This was everything I wanted to talk about. Do you have anything to add to the Mob Rules discussion?
Yeah. What do you know about the album artwork? Because basically what happened was, I was going through my father's CDs, and I came across the 3 Sabbath albums that had Dio singing, and I chose that one to listen to first based on the album artwork. It just intrigued me. Do you know anything about the background of that?
I forgot. I always forget about the cover art. I think about it often, but whenever I plan these episodes, it's always an afterthought. And I remember thinking that I wanted to ask you your opinion on the cover art for this. So anyway, let's take a deep dive into it right now. Do I know anything about it off the top of my head? No. But I know that I love it. and I know that the impression that I get from it, like, he's talking about the mob. He's talking about a mob of people, and whether that involves, to me, it's not, the mob. It's not organized crime. It's a mob of people, following the crowd, so to speak. And, I look at this cover, and I see, the graffiti, and I see these faceless figures. And to me, that says, when you follow the crowd, you just blend right in, and you're no longer an individual. Like, that's what I take from it. So let's, yeah, they all look alike. They're all covered in these tattered garments, and and they're headless. Like, it's not even that their faces are blacked out. Like, you can kind of see straight through these cloaks, or these. It's like they're all. They all have like a blanket wrapped around their head and over their shoulders, so it looks like a cloak. But these are like tattered blankets, and if you really, like, if you zoom in, like, you can see clear through them. Like, so it's not even that their faces are blacked out. Like, they just don't have heads. So that's scarier too. Like, to think about it that way, and that kind of reinforces what I'm thinking. It's like, if you follow the crowd, you're just blending right in. You're no longer an individual. Like, you're
no longer a person.
Right. It's that collective mindset. But yeah, these people like, I've never looked this closely at the faces, or the lack thereof. Like, I'm pretty sure, like, they just straight up don't have heads. It's like the Invisible Man. That's pretty cool. So yeah, let's do a deep dive. We're still going. Yeah, here we go. I like this site. Gray flannel suit. The man in the gray flannel suit. This is a good site. Oh yeah, that's pretty cool. That explains why I love it so much. So, the cover painting is by fantasy science fiction artist Greg Hinbrandt. It's essentially a recreation of his 1971 work, Dream 1, Crucifiers. And yeah, it's the original. Okay, yeah. Crucifiers.
Can you send me a link to the original?
Oh yeah. No, I'll send you the original image. Yeah, it's the album cover. It just doesn't have Black Sabbath mob rules painted on the wall. And now that I'm looking at it, like, it looks like instead of graffiti, that might be painted in blood, because this is called Dream 1 Crucifiers, and it is the group of faceless individuals, and it looks like they've just hung someone from the neck, because there's a sheet drawn across the it's like the underbelly of, like, some gallows. It's like this wooden structure, and it looks like someone was just dropped beneath this wooden plank and hung. There's a blood stain on the sheet covering the base of the structure where the person was presumably dropped through. So these people have just, picked who they're going to be mad at or condemn, and, metaphorically crucified that person. So presumably there's a dead body behind the sheet with the blood stain on it, and there are five faceless figures who have just put this person to death or people to death. There could be multiple people for whatever reason. And oh, there we go.
I think I just found it. Oh.
I'm glad you brought it up, because, as I'm just learning now, there's a hook on the left side that was apparently changed. I gotta compare the two now. There's a hook on the left-hand side that was changed to a crucifix
Yeah,
for the album cover.
Yeah, interesting. That's interesting.
More like a devil's head in the Oh, yeah, and the blood stain on the fabric, or it might be draped skin, they're postulating, was made to look more like a devil's head on the album cover. Yeah, I can't believe... I'm mad at myself that I forgot to put that in. Maybe I messaged that to you. But I did want to talk about the album cover, and it's always... Album covers are always an afterthought, and I don't know why I do that.
No, the reason I mention it is, like I said, out of the three, it was the album artwork was the most notable, so I picked that one. Even though the Dehumanizer artwork is cool, it's almost like, as somebody who grew up in the 90s and discovered this probably around 99, 2000, somewhere in there, that Dehumanizer looked more like a stereotypical metal cover, whereas this was just intriguing.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in this image. We were talking about the cover of Heaven and Hell on the last one, and what I love about that album cover is I get a sense of realism from it. Like, it's angels, but like Bill said, we all have our vices. Like, what I took from it was, the angels kind of sitting around smoking it, like, it humanizes them, turns them into relatable people. Like, they look like they all just got off of work and they're exhausted and they're sitting around smoking and shooting the shit, like, real people would. So, they're angels, but they're not perfect, and they're smoking cigarettes, or they're smoking dope, and they're probably, like, complaining, swearing back and forth, just like, real people shooting the bull. That's what I love about that album cover. But you're right, the Mob Rules album cover it's layered. Like, it's a busy album cover. Like, it's very provocative. It's very thought-provoking. And yeah, I didn't realize that, this was a painting that was released 10 years before the album, by a science fiction fantasy artist. So that's really cool. And, like, the name, like, Crucifiers, like, that's exactly what the mob does once they pick a target, It's, and these people, these members of the mob have lost their individual identities, and it's a collective mindset. It reminds me of the Borg, too. Like, it's frightening. And, that's a big thing. It's something that's always going on in our country, but, especially right now. I don't want to get into political stuff, but, like, there's so much going on in our country right now with this mob mentality, So, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Did you have anything else?
No, I think that about wraps it up. I actually have a 6 o'clock meeting, so this works out perfectly.
You have a 6 o'clock meeting?
Yeah.
All right, well, I will let you go. That's perfect timing, and I will let you go so you can do that. And, yeah, let me know what you think when you review those Dio albums.
Will do.
All right, have yourself a good meeting and a good rest of the night, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right, have a good one.
Take it easy.